Have you ever heard someone's story and thought, wow, how do people survive those things? How do people stay whole? And how do they become such amazing people with all of that stuff? Well, my guest today is exactly that kind of story. And so Elaine Elisabeth will be sharing in just a moment. So stay and watch the show. But I'm telling you, it is mind boggling, the human spirit. And she is such an eloquent communicator that I loved having the conversation with her. And I can't wait to share it with you. So stick around. Mhm. Welcome to my podcast, Today's Dream, Tomorrow's Reality. My name is Vicki Poole. I'm a master transformational coach and hypnotist specializing in habit change. And this podcast is sponsored by the Enlightened Peach. And it's all about embracing our mosaic life. And some of you may ask, what is a mosaic life anyway? Well, it is recognizing that all the pieces of our life, the good, the bad, the indifferent, have all come together to make us who we are. Change any one thing, and we are different. With that in mind, I invite you to embrace your perceived imperfections and celebrate who you are. This podcast is unedited and raw, just like life. I am your host, and I have a special guest I'll introduce to you in just a moment. And I know you can see her off in the wings, but that's okay. But I would love to ask you to do me a solid, and that is to leave a comment, ask a question, and to remember to like, subscribe, and share. So now let's get started. So this lovely lady right here, well, I'm trying to move the screen over here so I can see you better. This is Elaine, and she and I actually met in a group that we're both in, the Full-Time Purpose community. And it's such an amazing community in and of itself. But I saw her on there sharing some of her story, and it was like, oh, I have to know more. And so I reached out, and so here we are. And so I'm going to let her share a little bit about her, and then we'll just kind of have a conversation and we'll discover a little bit more. Sound good?
That's beautiful. That's very perfect. Yes.
All right, good.
So, first, I would like to just say I feel very honored to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me on this. Your show is so much in an alignment with how I live my life, which is unfiltered, and raw and vulnerable and authentic and very transparent.
Mm-hmm.
And I I love that you don't edit this as well, because like you said, it is how life is, and I trust the divine flow that comes and speaks through the pauses, through the, you know, perceived mess ups or
Right.
mistakes.
Yeah.
So thank you. I feel very blessed. It's divine timing for me as well. Um, so I have always been one to share very openly and vulnerably, because I've had an extensive background in so much like trauma and addiction. And I kind of, I felt like an outcast from the very beginning. And I felt like oversharing was a way for people to like under, understand, but
Mm-hmm.
really I think, it's just interesting how I've learned that actually sometimes in my past, oversharing has been a way for me to push people away.
Yeah.
Um, but I've come now to this place where I feel very empowered by sharing the full raw details of my story, which do include childhood molestation. They include emotional neglect, from caregivers, rape, other sexual assaults, addiction to just about anything. um and I've used those situations in my life through some of those most oppressive themes. I have learned to find my empowerment through that, and sharing and telling it in such a raw and vulnerable state is what I've seen inspire others to begin to learn how to share their story, and really like
Yeah.
my saying, like your truth transforms others, because when one person stands fearlessly to share those things that were swept under the rug before, it really allows for the boundaries to be dissolved and for us to see that we're all like in this experience together, and we all have our own unique pain points that create the way that we move about in the world. So, um, so yes, it's kind of like what I have learned to do. I is really just speaking my truth
Yeah.
through life, and like you had saw on my post, just like empowering others through those very ugly moments that we have in life, because the human mess is just that, we perceive those messy moments as bad when it's not. They're experiences. For me, they've been experiences to bring me closer to my divinity and the essence of all that is.
Yeah, perfect. Well, let me get back to one thing real quick. When you said you were glad that I didn't edit and everything, the main reason I don't edit is because I started my podcast because I felt like I had filtered my voice my whole life, depending on who I was in front of. One of those things that you learn as a child that, these people will let you be funny, these people will let you be, and you just learn how to mold yourself into any situation, right?
Yes.
And I recognized that I was still doing that as an adult. And so I was looking for a way to get my voice out. So when I started my podcast, I thought, now, wouldn't it be counterintuitive to let my voice out and then turn around and filter it,
Mm,
edit it and everything? So I said, okay, I don't know if anybody's going to want to listen if I don't edit, but I'm not going to edit. And so I've been really surprised, that a lot of people are really liking it and wanting to be part of it. And part of it is because of that. It gives you that ability to just speak, and nobody's going to take any of your words out. Nobody's even going to take the ums out, It's
mhm.
just your story is your story. And that's what I love so much about this podcast that I've created, the Today's Dream, Tomorrow's Reality. And another thing is that, I loved as you were saying those things, I could hear some of the stuff that I talk about all the time. Because one of the things, I have a group on Facebook, the Stand Up and Stand Out community. And what I tell them all the time is that, like I say in my intro, anything that we've done, if we take it away, then we're different people, because we
Mhm.
need that experience to help us grow and become who we are. And the other thing is that I tell my group, any of those situations that you ever think, oh my gosh, if that hadn't happened, I would be here, or I wish that hadn't happened, or anything. I said the best thing you can do is step back and then see what was the lesson I needed to learn. Because
Mhm.
if you don't learn that lesson, you're going to be repeating it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So I got a question for you.
Mhm.
I know you said that you had some abuse when you were really young. So do you remember what age that started?
Yes. So 5.
5?
Yes. And I'm currently writing my memoir, which is
Okay.
on Amazon Vella, actually. So I'm doing it. Um, Amazon Vella is actually like a short story form of, so like you can put out an episode a week or an episode. I
Okay.
don't have to like wait and publish it all, because so anyways, I have my memoir up, and I'm writing about this currently.
Okay. So it's fresh in your mind.
Yes, it is. And what's so fascinating too is now being on this path of healing the perceived limitations, and now stepping back and actually like going intentionally and consciously going back and excavating these aspects of my life and connecting the dots to present reality. um I'm writing, and then these themes are showing up like in life,
Hmm.
so being molested at 5 years old by my then stepbrother, who was 12, several times. I didn't actually ever think that it had an effect on me. I actually thought it was really normal, and would tell people that I've already had my first kiss and I've already touched, like
Okay.
inappropriate places, and honestly, nobody really said anything about it. Like I told my mom about it, but my mom was in her own addictions at that time and put off getting any type of intervention until it happened a few more times. And so, yeah, I didn't actually think that something at such a young age would have such a profound effect on my body, my sexual relations, intimate relationships, my safety. I mean, is literally everything in how I connect to the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think for me, especially someone who has struggled with addiction and suicide attempts since the age of 14, um, talking about this aspect of my healing journey not only has, lightened the load on that, but also so many people have been molested as a child that don't talk about it because they think just the same thing. Oh, it was no big deal, or it was minimized so much by an adult, or
Yeah. And sometimes they believe nobody's going to believe me anyway.
yes, yes, exactly, exactly. Um, and especially with parents hearing it, as a mom now, I mean, I could see why my mom was not wanting to believe it, that's like the that's like, the one thing you feel you're supposed to be doing, protecting your child, you know, it and that happens. It's very out of control if you feel very out of control and helpless. So for my situation, my mom didn't really want to believe me, um and I think that is the case for a lot of people,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well.
Well,
But
being a hypnotist, one of the things that I talk a lot about is that, the brain and the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And you probably already know this, but I'm going to say this anyway. We create our beliefs about ourselves and the world between the ages of birth and 7 years old. All
yeah,
of that time, we are an amazing sponge for anything anybody tells us or does to us. We don't, it's like we don't understand the difference between the cartoon that we're watching at that age isn't real, or that the game that we're playing with these little dolls isn't real. And so when we don't have the ability to discern whether somebody tells us something and it's true or not. And so it's amazing the amount of people in the world that go through life with these beliefs about themselves that have no basis in truth whatsoever, but they've still got them. And it's takes a lot of work to work past them and kind of take the sting out of them. You can't lose the memory, or you don't want to lose their memory because then you lose the lesson, but you
right.
can take that emotional charge out of it. So
Hmm.
it's amazing when something starts happening really young. And I know you said you had listened to some of my podcast, and I've had several people on here that were getting sexually abused at a very young age, and it's mind-boggling when you think about it, how many people it affects.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
so you sharing your story helps people to say, holy moly, I'm not alone. And there's nothing wrong with me. I didn't do anything. This was perpetuated onto me. And it gives the people the sense of being able to take back some of their control.
yes, yes. Um, it Yeah, so I worked in an AOD, an addiction and other drug abuse, like recovery home for a while,
Hmm.
for women, and we looked at a lot of like trauma and childhood stuff. And I there may be like 1 in 10 people that would go through the house that was not like sexually molested or some sort of um, abuse along that line, but never had connected the dots between those occurrences and their actions,
Mm-hmm.
from that. So yeah, I think for me too, connect, allowing people, for me to connect the dots out loud between the the actual event, the emotions behind the event, and the belief systems created within that and how that plays out in my adult life, um, and like how to rebuild from
Yeah.
all of those systems, has been kind of like my life's work in a way, because I have independently published a book that goes into, it's called Blueprint to the Heart, Sovereign Healing Journey. And so it's like how I learned to connect the dots between these experiences and like the developmental ages, and like what happens at those developmental ages and how that affects our thought processes and the way we perceive the world and our relationships. So yeah, it's just
It's a lot.
it is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Well, let me
very
ask
layered.
you,
Yeah.
so you've been connecting these dots, and so what is it, blah, 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 blah. Talk about not editing, right?
It,
What is it about that experience that how do you recognize the delay thing you were saying of the developmental delays? So how did it affect you so that you can see those developmental delays? I don't even know if I'm asking the question correctly, but
so if I'm um developmental delays, what could you expand? Like, are you? What do you mean by that? Like, how
well,
has that affected the way that?
yeah, because you said that you were connecting the dots and that there were developmental delays that were affected
Oh,
by all that.
so I would say that I wouldn't know if they would be delays as much as fragmented pieces. So,
Yeah.
meaning, so when people, what I have noticed within myself, right? People at the age of 5 or 6 don't go chasing, like, as a little girl, I was chasing boys and trying to kiss them at the age of like 5 and 6, and like really overstepping my boundaries. And not knowing how to be in a relationship, because that's kind of my whole life. I would chase everything and everyone, because I was afraid of, I mean, there was so much because I never felt taken care of. So I felt like I had to go and get these things myself, and I had to
Mm-hmm.
go get my own needs met myself in a way that I only knew how.
Right.
So it was like emotionally stunted, you
Yeah.
know.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. So which is, and I've been in the 12-step programs since the age of like 14, actually. And so
So what were you addicted to at 14?
alcohol.
Okay.
So my grandma, who was like my main caretaker, she got diagnosed with lung cancer, and we wound up taking care of her in our home. And her death spun me into the spiral. I mean, I was already exposed. My mom, my biological father, my grandparents on both sides of I mean, I come from a long line of addiction, like in alcoholism. So I grew up knowing that my chances of not being addicted were very slim, which, well, I have different thoughts on that anyways, but the environment that I had perpetuated that anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I started drinking. I mean, I started smoking cigarettes at 12, which led to smoking pot at like in 7th grade, and then drinking obscene amounts, and then an almost successful suicide attempt at 14, which the suicide attempt is really what brought me to, well, forced me into treatment and AA.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was also she stopped drinking when I was 10 years old. So she was familiar with AA, and that's why I was then put in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous at 15. So,
Yeah. So when you were 5, you were sexually abused by your stepbrother. So you said that went on for a couple of years. Did I hear you right?
no, so I don't, it happened about over a handful of times,
Okay.
I can't remember the exact amount,
Well,
but
you were 5. I wouldn't expect you to remember
yeah,
everything.
yes. I had at one point been like, well, it hadn't have been that much because I can't remember, so it was like all these ways of minimizing it.
Mm-hmm.
But so, and I learned that any amount of that type of contact is too much. It doesn't
Yes.
matter. It
Yeah. Doesn't
affects
matter
you.
if it's 1 or
Yes.
10, it's still not right.
And it's still, yeah,
It still can affect you drastically.
absolutely, absolutely. So, and on top of that, I I did not meet my biological father until I was 24. So I grew up. My mom also did not really have a biological father. And my grandma, despite her, I had idolized her, being my main caretaker. She was an extremely angry and verbally like abusive person towards my mom, and the stories that I hear towards my grandpa. But so I grew up in a man hating household. My mother hated men, thought they were good for nothing except for sex. And I learned some extremely dysfunctional beliefs, like you need one in to get one out, meaning like in relationships. Like she specifically would tell me, well, to get over a man, you need to have
Mm.
another man in,
Yeah.
and so seeing her go through relationship after relationship, and also the infidelity there, um, really was a beautiful breeding ground for codependency and a lot of toxic cycles that I'm very much dealing with today, breaking free from some of those very deep wounds. So, yeah, I didn't know my biological father. My mom had many boyfriends. I mean, she was stunning, very smart, and also very, I mean, she was very young when she had me. She was 18. It was like a baby having a baby. And I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't, you don't know, I didn't know, I can't imagine. I mean, I had my son when I was 24, and still that's pretty young to me. I mean, your brain's still developing until the age of 26. You know, your frontal lobe is still
Yeah.
your decision making. So, yeah, I mean, I used to blame my mom extensively. I don't mean to chuckle, but I I I no longer, I feel so much compassion because I have learned to look at, like, she didn't know what she was doing. She
Mm-hmm.
literally had, until we know, like, until I knew the different tools and like how to do things differently, and knew that doing things differently wasn't going to hurt me. um I couldn't, it was very difficult for me to change anything. So,
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of times people get a little lost on some of this stuff, is because they get into that anger place and the blaming and all of that. And you can't heal in that place. You can't heal at
Right.
all. And, you know, and I know there's not a soul alive, may not have happened the things that you happened, but there's not a soul alive that had the perfect childhood and the perfect parents, because those don't exist.
Right.
And like for me, I know that anything that my parents did, they did because of the upbringing that they had. It came with them, it was part of them. And you know, and it's back then, especially, you didn't talk about things. Everything was taboo. You know, you kept it in the house, you didn't speak about it, you didn't get help or anything. And so I love that we as a species now are in this place where we can break those cycles that have been, most of the time they're generations back, you know, I mean so far back, the dysfunction, you know, because dysfunction breeds dysfunction. And we're
Yes.
at this place that we're stopping it. It's like, oh baby, no, not in my watch, this is gone. And so I love that you're doing the book, and that you're talking to people and you're sharing your experience and breaking that cycle, because your children, their children, their children, they won't be perpetuating this like that.
Yes. Yes. eh, and yeah, exactly. I mean, I've heard it takes like 3 generations to stop and to change like the way that we make choices within
Mm-hmm.
generations, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I really find it so fascinating, the whole physiological and physical development that happens from experiences and how that shapes us and our belief systems as well, you know. So I'm thinking of like, so my grandma, and you know, 3 generations back was World War II for me, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Like, and yeah, war, it was about survival. Emotions were that meant you would get killed, like if you stopped to like feel your emotions or whatever
Right.
that meant, you know, it wasn't acceptable because you were literally fighting to live at that point. And so those are the belief systems that I'm working on breaking through. And that's exactly, you know, I go into great detail in my book on the historical events that happen, and like placing ourselves in other people's shoes at that time. Like, what would that have felt like? How would you have reacted? You know, because all of us, oh, I feel so much so that the storytelling, like we're doing now, is how we are able to actually empathize and connect the dots, you know, and be able to be
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, yeah, I didn't think of it that way. Or, oh, I can't imagine what that's like. So,
Yeah. Have you ever heard the study about the monkeys and how they were able to instill a fear in the monkeys and have them it go for generations?
I don't, I'm no, not off the
Okay.
top of my
Well,
head.
I
Yeah.
wish I could remember the exact information, but I just remember the gist of it because I thought it was so profound. The scientists had these monkeys, and they had them in like this enclosure, and then they had like a tree there, and then they had bananas at the top of the tree.
Mm,
And I believe it was bananas anyway. So they had this thing where they would try to be going up to to get the bananas. And so
mm,
they would shock them, and I could be a little off on that, but I will tell it's the same thing. But they would
but,
shock them, and so they got where they wouldn't go and get them anymore, right? And so they would only get the bananas that people would feed them. They would not go get them. And
mm,
even as these monkeys were doing this, they would bring in new monkeys and put them in there with them. And those new monkeys would go with what those monkeys did, and they wouldn't go up there either. But then the interesting thing happened was that they kept watching these monkeys over time. And for 2 generations, the monkeys were afraid to go up this thing. So
mm,
it was instilled in their DNA at that point to where they passed that on. And
mhm,
so when traumas happened in, you know, in our lineage, then it's here, and we just got to go do that shadow work and do all the things to get it out. And I think for so many years, people's natural tendency, because there's a taboo against this kind of stuff. If you
Mhm.
have a mental disorder, or you've been
Mhm.
sexually molested, or you've got a drug addiction, any of those things, people kind of will almost look at you different. And so
Mhm.
people don't say, right? And so then that keeps that stuff stuck in your DNA and you can't get it out.
Yeah.
And so to me, that monkey experiment was just profound to me, because you can logically think that, okay, this happened to my parents, they passed it on to me. But to think that for generations that could keep going if we didn't stop it, it's profound to me.
Yes. Yes, and that's essentially what I wound up like studying for years was epigenetics.
Oh yeah, I
And
love
and
epigenetics.
I
Yeah.
know, yeah, yes. So, and learning how the genes express itself and the adaption of that,
Mm-hmm.
and also studying a lot of, yeah, I mean, like the generational trauma and how that's passed down. And how there was this study with Holocaust survivors. And there's, the book, It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallen
Mm-hmm.
is such that was such a profound book for me, because it went into so many of the cases that he, as a therapist, experienced, where you know these people were unknowingly afraid of things, the cold, or this heat, or whatever the situation was, but could trace it back to like their aunts or to their grandfather or whatnot. And I was like, this is why it makes so much sense. It
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
and a lot of people are like, oh, you overthink things, like,
Right.
and it's like, wait, no, because this is actually dissolve it. When I started to learn these things, it dissolved so much
Yeah.
of the attachment that I had to the narrative of it, which allows me to share more openly, to understand that I'm
Yeah.
not the
And no,
narrative.
you're not married to it for the rest of your
Yes,
life. So
yes,
I love what you were just saying, because it's like anybody that has this phobia that they don't know where the hell they got it. People have
yes.
phobias of going across bridges or touching certain things or whatever. It comes from somewhere, and it's just, okay, take it as it is. Like, this is what I got. Now what? And and
Right.
and move forward and do the things to get it out of your space, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm sure you being a hypnotherapist, that like that's so much of what you do, right? Is going back
Mm-hmm.
into those subliminal beliefs and subconscious systems.
Yes. And I even do past life regressions too, where
Oh yeah.
sometimes we go back and we actually, in our imagination, we're going back in other lifetimes and cutting the cords
Mm,
to whatever it is that's kind of holding us bound to the space. So that's pretty powerful too.
yes, that absolutely, that is definitely. Um, yeah, I think all of those beautiful tools are so helpful in helping to release a lot of that, and also knowing that there's like more to the story than just
Yeah.
what our human mind can perceive.
That's right. That's right. So you said that you've had a whole bunch of different experiences, not just this one when you were 5,
Hmm.
and you had the drug addiction, and you've tried to commit suicide. And so when you look back at that time, is what do you feel like has been the biggest growth part of having had that experience that's perpetuated you to this space where you are now? Because you're doing amazingly well. You're so pleasant to talk to. You've got all of these tools and things that you're learning and growing and taking care of your lineage from here on out. I mean, that's pretty powerful stuff. And so I'm quite impressed. So
Thank you.
what is the thing that you feel like has just been the biggest thing that you just want to share?
Hmm. The the biggest thing or the biggest lesson?
Well, if
um,
they're different, give me both.
yeah. So through all of my experiences that I've had, whether that be an addiction to a substance or a person or a relationship, or to even or suicide ideation, um,
Yeah, I'm so
and
glad you said that, because a lot of times when people are talking about addiction, we just assume it's a substance and not these other things too. So that's powerful. Thank you. Sorry. Go ahead.
yes, no, I'm so, because it's, I mean, I look at as an addiction as anything. It's an internal void where we reach for an external substance or something to fill something within us that it's an external search. And that's exactly the overarching theme of my life. For everything that has ever happened for me through addictions or traumas has been to bring me to this space of seeing that those have been the barriers that have blocked me and kept me from seeing my divinity, the wholeness, the unity, the love that is me. And all along I was looking for the God self, the me within everything, and putting attachments onto these people or drugs, and wanting to experience anything other than what I was feeling, basically, because I share my story, and it's quite extreme compared to some people. However, it's not, though, because that's, I feel, the core of most of the human experience. It is, we're just shown to it in different ways, like the emotions. For me, learning the emotions that are behind all of that, because I feel we're such a society, and I have been taught to suppress and repress
Hmm.
the emotions, and the emotions are what set us free, and or at least me, like, because that's, I was running from all of that, running from myself, and the discomfort, or only chasing happiness, or chasing the good feelings, or the up times. I felt like you can only do that for so long.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Before it starts crashing down, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's funny that you're saying that, because I had a conversation with someone earlier, because I had an experience earlier today that kind of upset me.
Mm,
And so I was talking to someone on the phone afterwards, and they're starting to tell me, well, and they're giving me all these scenarios about what's good and all these different things. And I said, that's not where I'm at right now. I'm not ready to be looking at those. I can look at those tomorrow. I can look at them this evening, but right now I got to feel the feels of all the stuff, because I don't want it to hang around. I'll get this shit out and
yes,
then I'll be good. But if I
yeah,
suppress it down, I'm going to feel bad for days.
yes,
And so, I think we're taught as kids, because how many times as a child did you hear this when you start crying or something? Oh, hush, it'll be okay. Don't go to your room,
you're fine.
anything. Yeah, you're fine. You're fine. And so we're taught that we're not supposed to express those emotions. And I will say, I have an adult son,
Mhm.
and he had anger issues when he was young. Well, I didn't know how to deal with them. I didn't
Mm,
know what was appropriate, because that was not me. I didn't have all of that. Or I would say, when I had anger issues, they didn't come out that way,
mm,
so I didn't know how to
yes,
express them. Right. And so I think so many times, like as a parent, since I didn't know how to deal with them, it wasn't like I said, oh, go ahead, baby, feel the stuff, go ahead and break this, whatever. Because, that wasn't in my wheelhouse. And I don't still know if that's the right thing. But I sometimes will chastise myself, because the more I learn about things, I think, well, I sometimes wanted him to suppress how angry he was. I didn't want him to be being angry. And I think that's what happens sometimes. If somebody's upset or angry, even if it's not at us, it makes us uncomfortable.
yeah, yes, yeah. Um, Yeah, I mean, I used when I worked at the recovery home, this is the example that I would give to how conditioned we are to suppress emotion. So
Hmm.
someone's crying, right? You offer them a tissue. Why? Because like in society, we see um, we like it's a right like well I didn't want them to feel bad or I didn't want them to I feel it's a way for people to feel like they are doing something in an uncomfortable situation. um but really it's teaching us like, oh shush, it'll be fine, like
Hmm.
here's a tissue, wipe your tears away.
Yeah. We don't
And
want to see them.
right,
Yeah.
or don't mess your makeup up, or whatever that is, which it's not a bad thing. It's just bringing the awareness to the belief behind why we do that.
Hmm.
Because I've had to learn to be like, no, let it come out, and the uncomfortability or being uncomfortable in someone else's pain, bearing witness to that is the healing part. Like we don't have to fix anything, but just to like allow the
Yeah.
emotion to just be. And
Yeah. That's a process though, right?
oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's like,
I will say
oh
there's many times something happens and I'm wiping the tears and I'm stuffing it down, but
yeah,
sometimes it's like, let that fly, let it fly,
yeah,
let it fly.
absolutely. Again, yeah, it's not. It just bringing the awareness to the belief behind of like the autopilot behind it.
Yeah.
Because there isn't. It's not. No, there's nothing wrong with that at all. We want to comfort people naturally.
Hmm.
We want to be comforted naturally. Yet that has allowed us to not want to feel discomfort.
Yeah. I have got where a lot of times when I get into one of those emotional states, if there's someone close to me, I'll just ask them, can I just have a hug? All I need is a
Yeah.
hug and I'll be fine, and then I'll go on about doing all of my working through it and everything. But sometimes you just need somebody to say, baby, it's going to be okay.
Yes.
And I've shared many times with people, but I have a picture of myself at 5 years old on the wall in my bedroom. And I talk to that
Mm,
5 year old me all the time. And I tell her the thing that I always wanted to hear as a young child and even growing up was, it's going to be okay. Doesn't matter
yeah.
what's going on, it's going to be okay. And I think um, doing a lot of this work helps us to do that for ourselves, right? So we're not looking for someone else to do it for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So did
Um,
you share your thing or did we get off track?
I'm like, from what? I don't know.
You were going to share the thing that was the biggest thing,
Oh,
the
yeah.
biggest.
It was no, that's all part of it. That's
Okay.
definitely
Okay.
all part of it. I mean, everything's connected. So it's totally because it comes back to exactly what you were saying. It's like
Yeah.
that the us being um the autonomy that happens when I can meet my own needs and know what I need versus, looking to externally do that. That
Hmm.
I can do that. And I don't have the attachment to the needing of someone else to give that to me. So that's
Yeah.
the overarching thing
Yeah.
of my existence, I feel. I just had so many different roads to understand that in many different layers.
Yeah. So you're that drawing that you see sometimes it says this is what I thought life would be like, and then it has this other one where it says and this was what life was, and it has the lines that just go all over the place. And don't you
Yes.
feel like that's the way most of us are? We've got this idea of how we feel like things are supposed to go. Even as an adult, I'll do that sometimes,
Yeah.
Okay, I want to get to this goal. This is how I'm going to get there. And then like part of the way it's like, think again.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And a huge part for me, because like I said at the beginning, I was raised to I mean, I never considered myself to be a go-getter, but I would always get what I wanted. Like I would go after and get what I want. And if I never failed at that.
So what do you
Um,
mean? Just to kind of
um,
explain that a little bit more.
People, like if I wanted to be in a relationship with someone, like I would, like, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
afraid to put myself out there and to, get rejected. Also jobs, like I'm very confident in like what I could do, what I can do. Like I would just go out there and get it. And if things would get in my way, like I didn't stop. I could be relentless in pursuing what I wanted. Um, no
So do you
matter the
think some of
boundaries.
that comes from as a child because all these things that were happening, you had to be in charge of you and you had to make sure that everything happened for you?
That's part of it for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things. Yeah, the safety and security, because I didn't think or trust that I would be given what I needed through just the allowance and the flow,
Right,
or
right. Because there
and
was none evidently in your house,
right,
right?
right. So, and I think too, a lot of society it teaches us to go get what we we want and to overcome those obstacles rather than and I'm not saying that's not it, but for me it was like, wait, the resistance is actually a rerouting, and having to learn to trust the
Mm-hmm.
process of no, of the unknown, and that I deserve and I'm worthy of the beautiful blessings that I once was like, I have to go get, so the worthiness in trusting that I deserve those things, that they will come to me, and trusting that I will be provided those things versus
So,
fighting to get them.
yeah. So with all the things that you went through, at what age did you start getting this space of, I want things to be different. I'm so sick and tired of this. What do I need to do? How did you get to that place?
So at 24, I was in my first inpatient treatment, and I wound up actually getting pregnant, like right right out of treatment. And after I had my son at 24, um, I mean, it's amazing what a child can do. Like I started to recognize, like, holy shit, I did not have a normal childhood. Like I did not.
You
This
didn't
is
even
not.
recognize it before that?
I mean, like I knew it was like somewhat dysfunctional, but I didn't
Yeah.
recognize, like, wait, I would never, my child, I could never let this, do this. And like, so yeah, becoming a mom is really when all of the trauma started coming up. Now, uh, so that had led to a lot of illumination in the toxic relationship patterns, actually, with his father and my daughter. They have the same father. So, um, that relationship I'm still dealing with today.
Oh, wonderful. As she
It's
sings it.
Yeah, I know. Because I've just, it has been, uh, I, if I could put everything, like this relationship just, oh my, it's so freaking toxic and it's so unhealthy for me. And even with the awareness that I had fallen back into the false sense of security and safety within the relationship. But
Mhm.
so that relationship, I was had has been a huge catalyst and door to my healing, actually. But the awakening that I had actually was in 2017. And I was like, I'm so done. I was raped, like brutally raped. I don't
Mm.
remember most of it. I just remember my friends came and for to do an intervention because I had been like drunk for a month straight. And they saw how beat up I was, and so we went to a hospital, and at that point, once I finally got the alcohol out of my system, I was like, I'm ready. Like, I want a higher love. Like, I truly want love. Um, um, and I didn't know, like, I knew that I had a sex and love addiction, like, because I had sex. I mean, I was so promiscuous for so much of my life and relied on relationships for the external validation. So it was at that point when I was like, I'm ready to do things differently, that I was actually brought to a place where I could deal with the core wounds of the love and sex addiction, um, which then opened me up to a catalytic relationship that people may call twin flames. I don't resonate with that freaking label anymore. Like, basically, it was just another trauma bond. However, I I have used, for me, and I'm so grateful that I am one of these people, because most people stick to the label, but I have used it. It opened up to see the generations that I have for healing. And that's really when a lot of my intuitive abilities became online, and when a lot of that I could see I'm a healer through my experiences that came online was in 2018. So since 2018, when the awakening happened, is really when all of these things started coming to light, and all of the dots that I've been connecting. Like, I have, am very versed in the gene keys. I don't know if you're
Oh
familiar with.
yeah, I'm familiar with Gene Keys.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and all of astrology, and I've been able to use a lot of the tools, basically just to uncover more of the patterns that have been limiting me to seeing my true self. So,
Yeah. So have you
um,
dabbled in human design as well?
oh yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, which actually, and I do want to share this, because for me, human design, learning my profile and
What
my,
are you?
I'm manifester, a 3/5 emotional manifester.
Okay, I'm a
Um,
manifestor 1/3, and I don't remember
okay,
what that is.
okay. So yeah, I really only, I mean, I'm very just like shallow on human design. I
Me
do
too.
know, I know my design thoroughly pretty well. But like, having as many open centers that I have, because I have 7 open centers out of the 9, which means to me, like, physically, like, I have to nourish myself emotionally and physically, and I cannot fit myself into that. And so since 2018, asking for that love to really come in has been love for myself.
Right, right. And that's where it should start, right?
Yeah, yes, that's only where it can start,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, for me at least, but
Well, for anybody, in order for them to be healthy in their relationships, they have to love themselves first. And,
yes.
I think a lot of times people either they don't know that because of the trauma and stuff that they've been in, their family dynamics and stuff. But man, if you can't love yourself, then you're not going to connect with a healthy love. You'll get some, but it's not going to be the healthy love that will nourish you, right?
Yeah, it depletes you, and it
Yeah.
keeps you stuck into conforming and devaluing and dishonoring yourself.
Yeah, and
Yes.
settling is a big one.
Because honestly, and this is for all relationships, not even just like sexual relationships. For the past year specifically, I have year and a half have stopped connecting with friends mainly. I mean, like, I'll have conversations, but I don't ask people really for insights anymore, mainly because I want to learn about me. Like, I'm so curious. Like, what would I do without the other insights?
Yeah,
Um,
I love
and
that.
yeah, I, because even even as someone that is aware, still having the outside input influences the real me. And I really just want to like learn about Elaine more, and have the discernment of like, okay, other people's projections onto me versus like the real like me.
Yeah.
um
Well, it affects us. If scientists who are measuring atoms and all the different things, and they've proven that just by observing that stuff, they are altering the results, right?
yes, right.
So if it can do that for that, then somebody else's opinion or somebody else's input is going to alter the results for us too.
Yeah. uh, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and it's just so interesting because uh, I guess life and living is the paradox of it all. Like, you don't know until you experience the other, right? The duality within allows us to see the unity of all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I didn't know how much I was actually influenced by others until I didn't have the other to influence me.
Beautiful. I love that. Well, we're getting close to time.
Yeah.
So, is there anything like I know we've gone all around the world in this. So, is there anything in particular that you wanted to make sure that you said something about that we might have not have touched on that you want to share? Then go ahead and share that. But I will say, everybody that's watching or listening, that in the show notes, I will have all the links to everything from the books to the your how to connect with you on social media, and all of that stuff. So that will be there for you, so you can just click on it and peruse at your leisure. So is there anything that you want to share at the end?
Yeah, I would say that one of the most important things, because it can sound like, well, like I just use these experiences and I empowered myself through it, and yay, here I am. It's not like that. It's a freaking mess. like, like that. The spiritual bypassing that can happen when you do see, people are like, oh, I've used these empowered experiences, like to know that. And like your unedited podcast, it's just that it's a process, and
Hmm.
all of the experiences and the feelings and the emotions, I had to validate them, as ugly and as huge as they may have been. I had to. They were all important. All of the ugliness was once, I see that it's a way that was a protecting me,
Hmm.
and it was important and is important to acknowledge that, because a lot of people, if they relate to my experiences, it will be difficult to understand, well, how do I get from A to Z? But there is the whole experience of like unbecoming, and as messy as it is a beautiful mess
Yeah,
that
you
can.
feel better as you go through it. Because I will say,
Yeah.
some of the times that I've worked on this kind of stuff, I mean, I would have that so hard crying, that there's snot rolling down your face. And I mean, you didn't want to have anybody sitting next to you when you were doing it, because it was really, really ugly. And sometimes that can get so tight and bound that you start thinking, well, is this worth it? But let me tell you, and I'm sure you can say this as well, Elaine, anybody that's dealing with this stuff, get some help, for one thing, because sometimes I like to say, we can't see our shit when we're in it.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes an outside perspective. That's why coaching is such a powerful, powerful tool. So anybody that's going through something now, reach out to the coach, reach out to Elaine and talk to her. You can reach out to me.
Yes.
And so anybody that you can reach out to and get some help, then it gives you that ability to do that ugly, ugly cry and still feel capable of taking the next step.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That
Yeah.
this is painful, and also there is light. It gets lighter.
Yeah, it does. Quicker than you think too, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so beautiful. So thank you so much for being here, Elaine. This has been so eye-opening, and I have enjoyed talking to you and getting to know you a little bit better. So I want to stay connected with you for sure.
Yes,
And
so fun.
like I said, I will have all the information in the show notes so people can look back at that as they peruse this. And so I like to end this with one of my favorite quotes. And I keep saying I'm going to look and make sure, but I heard that Lincoln said it, but I'm not sure. So if it's not, you can just correct me. Okay. The best way to predict the future is create it. So
Mm.
we create it with all these amazing things that we learn and we do. And so thank you, everyone that's here. And like I said, Elaine, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's very powerful stuff.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel very blessed.
Thank you. Thank you. We are the blessed ones. Thank you. So, all right, everybody. I will see you on the next one. Mwah.